Before I start to tell you the story of these remarkable men, I'd like to tell a very short story of a far less remarkable man, myself. I was born in Tel Aviv, Israel, and when I was about 10 years old, my mother took me to spend the summer in a mysterious, exotic, faraway land filled with rich and splendid treasures. I'm talking, of course, about New Jersey. And when I got to New Jersey and attended summer camp for a couple of months, I made a bunch of startling discoveries. Some discoveries were small, like the fact that juice, previously believed to reside in fruit, actually could come in a box, or that there was a channel on TV that had nothing but cartoons. But other discoveries were significantly larger, like baseball. Even with my juice and cartoon-addled 10-year-old mind, I knew that there was something profound and profoundly American about baseball. A game which you could strike out 60, 70% of the time and still go back at bat, still swing, and still win. And I knew that I wanted to live in America. I went back home at the end of the summer and 10 years later moved to New York. A couple of years ago, my wife and I was in a graduate school, and we decided to spend some time in China. And here we are in Beijing in one of these quintessentially Beijing-y, smoggy, hazy, rainy afternoons. And nothing to do except for sort of stare at the very small television with exactly one channel in our hotel room. And we see a picture of this boy. And the picture was very clearly taken sometime in the 19th century. The boy was very clearly Chinese. And the building next to which he was standing, it was very clearly Yale University. And I sort of thought to myself, I had no idea that there were Chinese students in Yale University, nonetheless, in the 19th century. And I started researching the story and discovered that these remarkable young men whose story I will soon tell you, they wrote a lot of letters, and they kept journals. And when I read their journals and their letters, I couldn't help but feel an immediate sense of tremendous, tremendous empathy. Because like them, I came from a different culture. And like them, I came here to attend school. And like them, I felt that I had to work really, really hard to understand what the culture was about and to fit in. And like them, I couldn't help but feel that no matter how hard I try, perhaps incurably, there would always be a little bit of foreignness. And on that cheerful note, let me tell you the story of the Fortunate Sons. It begins in 1872, or rather a few years before, in China. And China in the second half of the 19th century is a country teetering on the verge of disaster. It controls about 10% of the world's territory and about a fifth of the world's people. And yet it is a country that has not yet industrialized and where the population growth is extreme and rapid. By the 1860s, or 1840s, excuse me, China reaches something along the lines of 450 million people. And that's a lot of mouths to feed. There are famines. There are rebellions. There are all kinds of signs of corruption. Seeing this, of course, the Western powers never miss an opportunity. And they think to themselves, well, here is an easy target. And they begin playing a game known at the time colloquially as carving the Chinese melon, which means using either their ambassadors or their flotillas, forcing China into all kinds of concessions, territorial and economic. And China understands that unless it does something really fast and really drastic, its future is very bleak. And the decision they come to is to send a group of young Chinese boys to be educated in America. In this task, they had just the right man. His name was Young Wing. He grew up in the south of China, educated in a seminary, in a Western seminary in Macau. And in 1850, the Reverend who was his teacher was recalled back to the United States, and Young Wing decided to go with him, and arrived here and went to Yale University and became the first ever Chinese man to graduate from an American university. And here he is, graduating in 1854, going back to China, brimming with the audacity of hope. And he's thinking to himself, this is an opportunity to remake the country. I had this amazing education at Yale. All that I have to do is make sure that more and more boys such as myself have the opportunity to have the same experience. But China is a very different place. He finds a small house in his native village, and across the street from that house, very odd things are happening. I told you before that China had 450 million people around that time. What I didn't say is that they were governed by a bureaucracy of slightly over 40,000 clerks. You think our system of government is broken. And since it's a very small number to govern a very large number of people, corruption was absolute or very prevalent, and each local governor had tremendous powers. And the governor controlling the region where Yang Wing lived had a system. He would accuse you of theft or some other petty crime and condemn you immediately to death. If you had the money to pay to prove yourself innocent, very well. If not, you were executed. And across the street from Yang Wing's house were the execution grounds. And across the street from his house, the bodies were piling high. And Yang Wing looks at this and he shudders. He says to himself, something very radical needs to happen. He leaves his village, he goes to Shanghai, he works very hard, becomes a very wealthy merchant. And by the time the people in the Forbidden City, the Mandarins, are ready to move, they understand that this guy, the first ever Chinese man educated in America, he's their man. They come to him and they say, okay, look, we don't want anything from the Americans except for their technology. All we want is their science. That's all you have to make sure the boys learn. Yang Wing, of course, knows things are a little bit more complicated. So he puts together the mission. He selects 120 boys, the youngest of which is 7, the oldest, I believe, 13 and a half. They all board together in 1872 on the unimprovably named ship, the Spirit of Peking, and off they are to San Francisco. Now, in San Francisco, there were, of course, a lot of Chinese people at the time. These are the sun-bitten, hard-working men who had built the Transcontinental Railroad. But the boys, when they arrive, they don't care about their compatriots. They see wonders the likes of which they've never seen before. They see elevators and tram cars and electric bells, and, most excitingly, they see trains, which they call fire engines. They're extremely happy about this and ecstatic when they take a train ride on the Transcontinental Railroad across the United States to New England to their new homes. On the way, by the way, they're reportedly robbed by remnants of Jesse James's gang. They're attacked by bands of Indians. They have these kind of quintessential, dime store novel adventure. But nothing prepares them for the real adventure they're about to have, which is the adventure they have when they begin their lives and their adopting families in New England. Now, when they arrive there, they understand very quickly that life is going to be very strange here. They land, they disembark, they have these beautifully braided queues that they had to wear as signs of loyalty to the emperor, and long flowing silk gowns, as is customary. And of course, all the American kids call them Chinese girls, which makes them very, very upset. Now, in China, when they left home and said goodbye to their fathers and mothers for a 15-year journey, they made sort of like the most emotional gesture that a Confucian culture would allow, which is a series of 3 very deep bows. And of course, when they reach here, their adoptive mothers grab them and hug them and kiss them, which mortifies them to no end. And the culture seems very strange. This doesn't last long. Within a few months, definitely within the year, these kids are thriving. They pick up horseback riding, they pick up riflery, they start their own baseball team, which they wonderfully call the Orientals, and they were quite good. And they even change their names. Liang Dunyan becomes Baijing's Johnny. His best friend becomes Breezy Jack. We have a Coldfish Charlie, Ajax, and a bunch of kind of quintessentially American schoolboy nicknames. And the boys are doing very well here. They're thriving young men in a thriving young nation. In 1876, 4 years after they arrive, they're invited to be sort of guests of honor at the first centennial celebration, which is a huge international expo in Philadelphia.